10 o'clock. Okay, today we're talking about part 2. I'm not sure if there's going to be a part 3, but we're going to talk a part 2 on rentals. Last time we spoke about rentals, we spoke about, as far as I remember, we spoke about the placement of a tenant and the management of a tenant and what all those functions included. I'm actually just going to include that on here. In fact, just share the screen and just show that. No, that's not the one I want. Oh no, I can use that one. And then, okay, cool. Should be loading now. Okay, you should see it. Most of you should see it. Okay. We talked about this brochure. Why is it not sharing now? Let me just hold a second, guys. Maybe if you know. Yeah. Boy, my Outlook is sorry, my Acrobat reader is messing up this morning. Okay, great. Well, anyway, we have gone to the brochure where we had those two different kind of brochures. We had for individual landlords, for landlords with 1 or 2 or 3 units, and we spoke about, there's a column on the tenant placement actions, and there's a column on the full tenant management. So there's 2 different kind of managements, 2 different kind of main features or products that landlords want. Either they want a tenant placement only, which is quite common, a bit more common in Joburg, although to a certain extent it is in Cape Town. There is a particular leasing fee for that. Typically, we're charging the first month's rent or 8% of the value of the lease. So the lease is 10,000 Rand a month, and the rent value is 10,000 Rand a month, and the lease goes for 12 months. That value of the lease is 120,000 Rand. 8% of that is typically what we are charging for placing the tenant. A full management is typically, some agencies charge the placement fee plus a management fee, a lower management fee, so maybe a 6% or 8%. If you ever come across a landlord and says, but the other agent's management fee is 6% or 8%, and Chorus, you're 12%, you're too expensive, please ask if the landlord is also being charged a tenant placement fee. That's super important. Are they being charged a tenant placement fee? If they are, it's typically a 7 or 8%, plus the 6%, they're charging then 14%. They're more expensive than Chorus. What we do as Chorus is that we just charge a standard 12% plus VAT of the value of each month's collections. So if we are billing water and electricity, we typically are charging a percentage on that as well. Not always, but typically that's a starting point. Some agencies charge 10% as a flat rate, 10% plus VAT, and 10%. We can be competitive on certain instances. So if it's a 3,000 or 4,000 Rand rental, we just won't negotiate, because it's the Rand value on 10% of 3,000 Rand to 300 Rand a month. We shouldn't take on deals less than, say, 450 Rand a month, just on our costings perspective. But if it's a 15,000 Rand rent and the landlord's insisting on saying 12% is too much, well, then you just chat with me and we can look at negotiating. Or, it's a contact of a contact, or that landlord's part of a bigger group of people we know, then we can look at discounting a little. I look at the Rand value as a first point of call. So yeah, I mean, I got a landlord the other day. They got how many, 15 units or something. The total rent value, I think, collections is about 30,000 Rand over like 15 units or something. And I said, like, it's 12%. Even that is too low. No, I must negotiate with a minimum fee of 2,000 Rand. Said we must negotiate, because go to 10%. I said it's not worth our while, because there's a credible amount of detail that happens for 300 Rand or 200 Rand. Okay, great. So that's the service. Those are the two services that we provide for tenant placement. Just as a reminder, what differentiates us as Chorus is that we're the only rental agency that uses the expert care program. The CARE of care is the four main needs of landlords. It's not only our four main values, the CARE for four main values, it's also the four main needs of landlords, and we build our business around that. The first need is the C for cash flow. Landlords, the number one need is to make sure that they've got maximum cash coming in. That is done through occupancy and collections. The second thing, we did this last time, so I don't want to go into too much detail. The A is for asset. They want to make sure that property is well looked after, because over a period of time, a big part of the return on investment is the value of that property going up over a period of time. If the property is not properly maintained, they don't get that asset growth. So if they're spending £1,000 on maintenance now, it's not that they're only spending £1,000 on maintenance now, but they're spending £1,000 to protect their asset, and it could be saving them 20, 30,000, or 50,000 Rand on asset value. So that's another way to couch that. The R is for reconcile. The administration and the reporting for landlords is super, super important. They want to know that their levies are paid on time, that they're getting their statements every month, and so forth. And the E is for excellence, and that is basically peace of mind. Overall, the landlord wants overall peace of mind, and the way we provide it is by doing the CARE. Now, what we're going to talk about now is the tenant placement process. The tenant placement process. Okay, so the way we take on a landlord, so we've spoken about the mandate and the landlord management agreement, which I have sent you copies. That is an agreement between ourselves and the landlord. It's more than just a mandate, it's really an agreement. So it keeps us accountable. So I say to landlords that you really need to sign this because it holds us accountable. If you have any issues with us, you can point to that mandate and say, Chorus, you haven't done X, Y, Z, and therefore I want to give you notice. So I couch it in a way that's in the landlord's interest. Obviously, we do need, not obviously, but we do need landlord written permission to manage their property on their behalf, to do stuff on their behalf. So we got them to do that. We got them to send a FICA, which is a proof of residential address, the FICA form, and a copy of ID. So now we're at the property. What we need to do is now evaluate the property. The principle on valuing the property is the same as doing it for a sales project. It's a CMA. It's seeing what else in the complex or what else in the area is this property of a similar features being rented out for, and then we're proposing that kind of rent. It's in many instances, if it's a 2-bedroom apartment in Sandton or in say Morningside, it shouldn't be that difficult. Or in fact, that's not a really good example because sometimes Morningside has multiple different levels of properties. But I would say Ferndale or like Ormonde, which has got more kind of a single level of socioeconomic level, you should be able to get a rent valuation fairly simply. The way you're going to do it, I do it on Property 24 on private property. If you were to download my private app called Pocket Let, I'm not sure if it's working 100%, but you can try it. What it does is that you put in the specs of the property, and then it trolls, gets all the data from all the different websites, and it'll spit out an average for you. But you can try that if you want to. I think that's on the valuation of the property. Work with the landlord. Sometimes the landlord is, the way I do CMAs is sometimes it's cut and dried. Like everything else is going for 5,000 Rand. It's pretty much everything's going for 5,000. Well, in Japistan, all the 2 bedrooms in this block are going for 3.8. I mean, that goes for 3.8. But sometimes you want to then test the market, say a 3-bedroom house in Morningside, I'm seeing the range is between 17 and 19,000. And it could go, maybe we can test it at 18.5 or 19 and monitor response for the first few weeks, and then we can then adjust it. We try and get the commitment from the landlord up front that we can negotiate, or we can talk about the rent value. If the landlord's pushing the boundaries, maybe we can then commit to him, say, Mr. Landlord, we'll go through, we'll market for that for now. I mean, you're saying it's worth 20,000. I think it's worth 16. I'm willing to, let's try 19.5 for 2 weeks, but if it doesn't work, can we have a commitment that we can bring the price down further? So try and get that price counseling done upfront with the client. Okay, so on the CMA, are there any questions? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. The rental market at the moment is a funny thing. It's turned on a dime in the past 3 or 4 or 5 months. Until recently, you had to be quite conservative in rental values. But we find across the board, and we can look at trends like this because we manage so many properties across Cape Town and Joburg. On the lease renewals, we're pretty much as a standard in many areas in Cape Town, most areas in Cape Town, hitting that 8 or 10% increase. In Johannesburg, we're getting massive pressure from landlords to do so. And in the past, we had to push back to the landlord to say, you cannot do that because you're going to lose a tenant and you're not going to find a new tenant. But landlords are increasingly getting away with those increases. Through COVID and those years, they've kept their rent stable for many, many years, and which is super unusual. And now they're actually saying, well, I just simply can't afford it anymore. The interest rate has made a big difference, and therefore rental values are increasing. So just be open-minded about your rent value. In the past, in the last few years, we were typically mostly negative or quite conservative, and we had to be. You can probably try and push the boundaries every now and again, but know your subsection of your market before you do that. Okay, cool. So now you're going to do your listing. You're going to take liquor photos. You're going to make sure that the lights are on, that the toilet seats are down, that the cupboard doors are closed, that you're going to neaten up the room if there's a tenant staying there. You're going to make doing the photography a bit of an event. And I know I was preaching to the choir here for most of you, but let's make sure your photos are kind of what you call landscape, and let's really make an effort on those photos. Then once you've taken those photos, you're going to send them with your listing description through to the our administration, and each of you guys would know who that is in each city. You're going to label those photographs. So what I do is I put them all out on my screen on my computer, and then I say, okay, the entrance or the outside of the building is the first picture. So I put that and drag it to the top left, and then I say, okay, the entrance is the next one. So I put them all in order, and then I label them 1 to 10 or 1 to 15, and I say 1 outside, 2 entrance four-way, 3 lounge or whatever. So I then labeled it, so I know what those pictures are, but I've labeled them 1 dot XYZ, so the administrator knows what order in which to do those photographs. The order to do those photographs is typically how would I walk through the property. So typically that kind of order. Okay. I mean, and it's obvious that you wouldn't do something like the bathroom first. I mean, yeah. Okay, cool. So that's on the listing side of things. Your listing description, I mean, this is all in my book as well. So please do read my book, and don't only use it as something to go to sleep at night, but just stay awake for as long as you can before you put you to sleep at night. But but what you're going to do is make sure that your listing description is as descriptive as possible. So don't just say like 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, property to rent. Like find something. What is it about this area? Even ask the tenant that's there, or ask the landlord when you're dealing with them, why did you buy this property? To the tenant, well, what made it? Why did you rent this property? What are those elements around that? And then you can then push those things. And don't say, I say to the landlord, like, sorry, it's a funny question, but there's a reason why you bought this property. I just because I don't know this particular area right here, right now, I'm looking for as much data as possible so that I can then, which if you know something secret about this property, which is really cool, I want to know about it so I can tell the market about it, and it's going to make your property more attractive. Okay, so on the listing description, really do put a bit of effort on it. The nice thing about mainly chorus listings, so it's less applicable to you guys. But once you've got a listing for a rental property, you can use that listing for years to come. So it's worth the effort. Okay, so on the listing side, so I think that's pretty clear. It's going to then go onto our web box. Back end is then going to private property and property 24. Then you're going to start getting inquiries. Let's get onto those inquiries as soon as possible. What I typically do is and there again, similar to on the sales side, or it depends what kind of sales property, is that I bulk my listings up on particular days of the week. So let's say I've got something in Ferndale. I say, well, on Tuesday and Wednesday, or say Tuesday and Thursday, or Tuesday and Friday evenings between 5 and 6 o'clock, I'm going to do viewings at that property. So when I get inquiries, I say to the tenant, I'm going to be at the property on Tuesday evening or afternoon, or on Friday afternoon. And each of you guys have your own particular kind of ways of working, what works for you guys. But this is typically what I did. And then the first inquiry, I say, can you make it 5 o'clock? Put them in for 5. The next inquiry, say Tuesday's fine. I say, can 5 o'clock work for you? The next inquiry comes in, I can also make Tuesday. can you make 10 past 5? So I'll stack it up, 5, 10 past 5, 20 past 5, half past 5, etc. And then I'll start again at 5 past 5, quarter past 5, 20 past 5. It's just what it does. It spaces everyone out. You find that a lot of people come in the first 20 minutes anyway, if you've got them, but it just helps space out. So you're kind of doing bulk listing, but it's not a bulk listing. You're doing kind of almost individual listings over a period of time. So that's a general rule, depends on the kind of property. If it's like a 50 grand unit in Westcliff, you're going to jump when everyone calls you because it's a 50K a month rental. So yeah, that's typically the way I do it. So therefore, I can then do multiple listings in a week. Because typically a leasing agent in Chorus is marketing 5 or 10 units at a time. You guys might be a little bit different because you've got individual units as you're going along. But that's typically the way I like to bulk up the inquiries. Let's get back to tenants as quickly as possible, please. Potential tenants. And I don't often have the patience for it, but I think it's a really good thing, is to find out from the tenants, if the property is not pet friendly, and there's certain things with the property, ask these questions up front. Do you have a pet? Or if there's certain things, how many persons are, tell me more about how many people is going to be. Certain kind of markets are going to try and cram in 30 families into that property. Ask the questions up front. If you only allow 2 adults or 2 kids, or 3 adults and 1 kid, find out about the specifications of the property. Let me just circle back to the listings. It's super important that you understand what are all the utilities being charged on that property. So really do get sight of the, make sure you got a picture of, or you get a copy of the levy statement. Deal with the landlord and say just to confirm with the landlord that everything is being billed, what is being billed should be billed. Because, so the utilities that can be billed is prepaid electricity, which is very simple. It could be billed through the body corporate, and that's through manual readings. But then there could be I don't know, all these different kind of lists. There's like a charge listing or a meter, the common area pricing, electricity, whatever. So electricity may be actually made up of 2 or 3 things. And Bisor and a couple of others I worked with, I mean, these kind of things are really, they cause hassles down the line with the tenant unless the tenant is aware of these things. You must make sure that all the different line items are very aware. Sometimes there's a standard charge of 70 rand a month electricity, plus your prepaid electricity. So just double check. Sometimes there's nothing, which is cool. Sometimes water is included in the levy statement. Although I would always warn the tenant to say it's included for now. I'm sure that the body corporate is probably talking about putting water meters in. Because increasingly every body corporate's too expensive to handle that water. Many years ago, most body corporates carried that cost of the water. It was in the cost of the levy. Now it is a separate billing. So so electricity and there's various things around that. There could be, don't be surprised if there's 1 or 2 extra things on electricity. There may not be, but there could be. There's water. And sometimes there's common area water or whatever. It's prepaid water. There might be prepaid hot water, prepaid cold water. There may be extra charges, I don't know, just check on that levy statement. Then you've got sewer, which just in Johannesburg alone, I think it's 546 rand 27 cents per apartment in northern suburbs Johannesburg, which I think is bloody insane, but that's a basic charge. Sometimes the water only 70 or 80 rand a month, and you got your sewage charge of 500 odd rand. The thing about sewer is that many landlords haven't been charging it, or many landlords do not charge it, or many landlords include it as their rent. They make the rent a bit higher. So whatever it is, just make sure that these additional charges are dealt with in some kind of way. Sometimes the landlord's going to come to the party and not charge it so they can be competitive to the unit next door, because the tenants are asking about these things. And you've got refuge. That refuge is often on the municipal bill or the council bill that the landlord gets on the rates bill. So double check that. Often the landlord's not charging it. And in the last few years, you typically couldn't get away with charging some of these things because of the competitiveness of the market. But I think it's a little bit better now that you can probably try and get in some of these charges again. Nevertheless, on your listing stage, make sure that you've got agreement with the landlord that everything is being charged that should be charged. Okay, and please do be quite detailed about asking the questions. Utilities is such a crisis now that we typically in our business have said our two main KPIs are occupancy levels, which is making sure our marketing is right, and our collections, which is debt collection. The third one, which is almost now as important as those top two KPIs, is the whole thing around utilities. There's hardly a tenant in the country that we manage that isn't complaining at some stage about the cost of the utilities. It is really a real challenge. And I would face some music up front with potential tenants as opposed to now trying to clean up the mess afterwards. Okay, so that's on the listing side. So we're doing the viewings. When we so now we're setting up the viewings. We're taking, what I typically do is I'll take a tenant application form with me. I know some of you may have different strategies on that. You may want to WhatsApp that application form or email it afterwards. I just use it as a tester. Would you like an application form? So I'm now doing the viewing with the property, with the tenant. My style is just to say, hey, here's a house, there's those rooms, please have a look around and let me know what you think. Some people like to walk tenants around. I don't think there's a necessarily right or wrong way. I personally, in my personality, don't like people walking me around, but I know some people do like to be walked around. So don't take me as your main example. I'm a little bit more impatient that way. Okay, so that's the being. At the end of when the person comes out, if they ask the question is, this is not bad, but what else do you have? You know that you can move on. This tenant is, you've lost this tenant. As soon as they ask what else do you have, it's 100% chance they're not, pretty much 99% chance they're not going to take a unit. But nevertheless, if they're not saying that, then I'm saying, how do you feel about the property? What do you feel? What do you think? And then I'm still, if the tenant says, no, it's not really for me or whatever, that's fine. Try and get as much conversation with tenants going as possible. I use it as a market thing. Oh, how does this compare with what else you've been looking at? Oh, no, this is a thing and that's a thing. And the pricing, what do you think of the pricing? I use it as market feedback so that when you feedback to the landlord, you've got data. You say, typically, this is what's happening out there. This is the feedback I'm getting from tenants. Okay, so really to use that tenant viewing as a data or information gathering session. Okay. Tenant said, no, I love it. I love it. I love it. Can I have it tomorrow? Whatever. You say, okay, that's fine. We'd love you. We want to get you into the property as soon as possible. You just need to fill out this application form, this tenant application form, just to make sure that you're qualified to stay in the property. And you need to fill out this form. You need to send us together with this form, and please fill it out in 100%. Otherwise, we'll have to return it. Send us a copy of your ID. Proof of income, which is typically salary slips, and 3 months bank statements. Please submit it to the email address that's on this application form, which is typically Everjoy or Gladys or whatever. So just make sure that those details in the application form that you're using is accurate. You can always tell them to copy in you with that application form as well on the email. Okay. Are there any comments or questions up to this stage? Now you've done the viewing, you've done your listing, you've done the viewings, you've now got an interested tenant. Any other tips from your experience that you think can help make viewings more successful or more productive? I mean, many of you have done many viewings for tenants. Ambisa was not here, unfortunately, but she's done many. Andres, Marcelo, Clinton.
Yeah, David.
Go for it, Nick.
One thing I would also suggest, I also ask the applicants to please add a proof of res, because I understand that Gladys or Everjoy or Asifa, depending on how busy things are, also follow up with the current and previous landlords. So I also ask my applicants to add proof of res. I'm just thinking what else I could add to what you stated. I think I also opt for the option of having the viewers or the potential clients send me everything first, and then I proofread it and I go through it before sending it on to Gladys and Everjoy. That's just because a lot of the time documents aren't labeled, they're missing things, application forms aren't filled out. So I try and streamline the process a bit for the admin team, because it's less likely that I'm going to get the application back then.
Nick, you're wonderful. You are so wonderful. No, I mean that like, because now the guys that say we want to close deals, right? We want to close deals. Our screening department is almost as bad as the banks. If you want to apply for a bond, you say these freaking banks, they want all that information and everything, and they want to double check. We have to do it, guys. This is the one department I very, very, very seldom stick my finger in and override what they've said. And even then, our team are hoodwinked. Even then, we've just had a circumstances last week where a tenant that we innocently placed had actually stolen another person's identity. We placed a tenant not knowing that this was not the real person. We got applications in and they are too good to be true. They're brilliant. First, the amount of fraud out there at the moment is just the criminality is just like huge. So what we've got to do as agents is work together with our screening department, not work against it. So we want to close a deal. The best thing that we can do, the quickest way we can help close a deal, is to press to the tenant that you want this place. I want you to have this place. Make sure you get the documents accurately. Especially a lot of guys and girls with their own businesses, and increasingly that's a new reality. Everyone is kind of hustling now because they may have lost their jobs, whatever. It's just a little bit more complicated. We need auditors' letters, financial statements, and all that kind of stuff. Just know that the guy's doing it for the greater good of the landlord and the greater good ultimately of ourselves. Because when it does go south, unfortunately, even though you're only the placement tenant, it will come back on you, landing on you anyway. Even though ultimately it comes back, I take full responsibility for it, but you just don't want that hassle in your life. So, in the good old days, we could approve 9 out of 10 applications. We're probably rejecting 50% of applications at least now. So if you need to close a unit, you need to get in 3 or 4 or 5 applications sometimes to close that unit, depending what area it is. Okay, so really, really do work. And I think Nick has done a beautiful thing to say, then you check those documents before going through to the admin department, and you will find it will go a lot quicker. We're processing hundreds of applications a month. The sooner we can get them done. And what hasn't helped is that because we're not approving as many applications, we need to go through a lot more applications. So instead of the guys running, say, 10 applications a day, we have to run 20 applications a day in great detail because we are rejecting so many. Does that make sense? Okay. How do we do the screening process? Let me go through that briefly. As what I said last time was, what is the quality of an ideal tenant? What is a quality tenant? A quality tenant has got 3 main characteristics. They pay well, they look after the property, and they behave well. They pay well, they look after the property, and they behave well. So we don't want someone who pays well, but then there's noise complaints every night of the week. Not going to work, not sustainable. We don't want a tenant that pays their rent on time, that pays their rent in full, that wrecks up the property, damages the property. There's one thing about being dirty, and there's another thing about actually damaging the property. there's certain kind of nationalities that just walk into a property and it's damaged. I don't know what they do, but it's just so, and certain kind of people. So we don't want the property to be damaged. So those are two easy ones. What is it? How do we then determine the financial viability of this tenant? Bear in mind, a tenant that pays well is three different things on that. They pay on time, every month, and in full. So they pay on the first of the month, the money must clear in our accounts on the first of the month. It must be the full amount. So that's the water, that's utilities plus the rent. Often the utilities is a few thousand rand. And that is where we get our biggest, when I look at the late payers list every month, typically the biggest thing is trying to collect those utilities. Because 2,500, 3,000 rand utilities, now there's a queries that utilities or whatever, it ends up at 10 grand very quickly. 3 grand now, and this is what I say to the team and what we discuss, is that 1 month rent is bad enough, but the 30 days happen very quickly, and before you know it, you're on a second month in arrears. So we have to be quite strict up front. But it's paying all their rent in full, and then the other thing is paying it consistently every month. There's no point 1 month paying on the 1st, the next month paying on the 11th, the next month paying on the 8th, the next month paying on the 1st. We want it on time every month. Okay, so how do we determine that? In the book, you'll see a process flow. So you can read through it in my book. By the way, some of you haven't got books. Those that I'm seeing you in Joburg, I'm bringing books up with me, so I'm just not going to carry it. I'll see you next week. So there's a process flow. So first of all, is the application submitted in full? I'm going through it in my mind. The next thing is, so are all the documents there? Is the application filled out in full? The next thing we're looking at is there rent? Is there income 3 times the rent? If it's not necessarily that we reject them, but we're going to look at it very, very carefully. I mean, if they're paying off 2 cars and the rent is not 3 times if the income is not 3 times the rent, well, then we'll reject them. Sometimes a tenant may not have any owings or any borrowings, so we can look at slightly less than that, but not typically, not as a rule. Then we're looking at is it pet friendly? If it's not pet friendly and they've got pets, we would have to reject that application. We look at if it's a 2-bedroom apartment and there's only, say, 4 people allowed in that apartment and there's 6 people on the application, because they need to list all the other occupants of they must list all who's occupying the property, then we have to reject that application. Okay, so we look at that, we scan the application first for is it going to be suitable for this property on kind of the details. The next thing we're doing is, okay, so now they passed that. The next thing we're doing is we're looking at the income and we're checking that there is that income. So are they financially sound? If they're not, then we're going back to them and say, can they bring on a guarantor? A guarantor is a surety on their behalf. So let's say it's a 10,000 rental and I only earn 20,000, then we need a surety that is going to be earning 30,000 plus. That surety is then going to sign on behalf of the tenant. Okay, so that's what if a guarantor can't be found, then we reject that application. If a guarantor can be found, then we go through the same application, so same process with a guarantor. We do a credit check, a TPN credit check. Now the tenant profile network. On that TPN check, there's typically a rent history. So we as rental agents, we provide data, the 1,000 odd rentals that we do a month, we provide data to TPN. So we pay for the data and then we provide the data. Such a great business model they've got. Anyway, so we're paying 10 to 15 grand a month to them on all the different applications and stuff. And we're providing all that data, but then so are so many other agencies. They're linked with all the property management software and all the data is being dumped onto them every month. We can then see a record, not all tenants have got this, but many tenants do. We can see a record, their payment history record, and it's got green blocks or red blocks or whatever on each month. Did they pay on time or late or whatever? So we can immediately see on that record what the payment history is like. We do test that by looking on the bank statement. The rent should be coming out on the bank. If they're paying EFT, should be coming out on the bank statement on those dates. So we're checking that as well. Also on the tenant check, we're checking it's going through Experian and TransUnion as well. That is then saying how many default judgments they've got. if they're on, I've got someone on debt review. If someone's on debt review, typically we're rejecting those applicants as well. But what we're trying to do, and this is the reason why, guys, it's important that we understand the context. Most applicants we need to reject straight up front. What we're trying to do is, how do we make this applicant work? So we're saying like, oh, the tenant said I paid off that debt. Well, that's fine. Provide us a proof that you paid off that debt. So this all takes time, unfortunately. So just bear that in mind. So work together with our screening team, tenant applications team to try and get this data so that we can make an applicant work. So we are trying to make it work. If we were to outright reject everything on what I've just said, we wouldn't have many applications that would pass. So we are trying to make it work, but bear in mind there is, the guys are looking at what is their bank statements looking like, what is going off those bank statements. The guys have a really good feel as to is it affordable for this person or not. Some people have got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of debt. They've got a great salary, but then they're paying off, like they've got a 50 grand salary a month, but then they're paying off 40 grand of debt a month. And I want to rent an 18 grand place with us. I mean, so the guys are looking at those kind of details. Okay, so we're doing a TPM check. That's then going to give us a probable rating or a good rating or not rating on, is this tenant capable of paying the rent? It's going to give us their opinion on that. It's also going to give us the chance of this tenant squatting, this tenant of not leaving. So all that data we're looking at. We're also looking at the bank statements to see that the things are legit. There's a lot of fraudulent activity, and some of it is pretty juvenile and very easy to see, but increasingly that documentation is becoming much more accurate. It's scary how we have placed 1 or 2 tenants in the last year, and like there's a drug addict in one of the places in northern suburbs. She's a drug dealer and drug addict, and that we've placed. And only now we've re-looked at this documentation, and only after very, very, very careful looking at, we see this documentation is fraudulent. So we need to be super, super careful. And yeah, so once again, be cognizant or be patient with our team. Okay, cool. So that we're going through that. We're also then making a phone call to the previous employers or to the existing employer to check that they do work there. Obviously, that's a lottery sometimes because people put fraudulent numbers there. But even then, if it's like a let's say it's like multi-choice and there's some cell phone number or some odd number there, we are checking these things. Also on the salary slips, there's a website called TaxTim that we're seeing, like if you're earning 47,000 rand a month, what typically would be your tax on that? And we're checking that against the salary slip, typically, if it doesn't quite look right. Because the oak is earning 47,000 rand and the tax is 2,000 rand on this pay slip, even though the pay slip looks really cool and perfect, it's clearly fraudulent. I think the guys are getting a bit clever. How stupid can it be? But yeah, some people are. There's once a Wimpy bill we saw like for 90 grand or something. Okay, cool. So we're checking that. What else are we doing? Yeah, and then we check it, and then we're phoning old landlords, previous landlords. We like to phone as many of those previous landlords as possible. Obviously, sometimes we're trying to get rid of someone and we're trying to negotiate someone out. And so we are willing to want that tenant to go out. So what happens if someone calls us? I'm not actually sure what happens if someone calls us as a reference, but I mean, with 1 or 2 people, we've actually written reference letters for them to help them get out, as part of the negotiation package. So we don't always believe the landlords that we call that they're existing landlords, and we're calling previous landlords as well, and we're asking them, did they pay their rent, did they look after the property, would you recommend them, etc. Okay, and then once that's all been approved, we are then rejecting or accepting. Either way, we are telling that tenant that unfortunately your application has been rejected. You might get some pushback on that, and on that pushback, don't immediately think that our guys are being unreasonable. I'm not saying sometimes they may not be, though that's very seldom. Is work with the tenant if they're going to push back and say, but this was this. Work with them and see what those characteristics are that's made them not qualify, and then ultimately just get the tenants to move on. because we may get that application, we may reject some good applications in between, but there are too many bad applications that we have to reject because it ends in tears. Oh, we can just make a plan for this person. What happens 3 to 6 months down the line when this tenant is ruining the place, or there's domestic issues, typically it's domestic issues, a lot of GBV, then we say, but hang on, we saw this coming. We actually did see this coming. Let's, when those warning signals come up in our head on the application stage, let's listen to that, because we do have enough track history on that. Okay, so that's the application side of things. Any questions on the tenant application process? Are we okay? Does it make sense, guys?
David.
Yeah, go for it.
So on the maybe the clarity one, when there's that rejection or acceptance, officially who's responsible to then communicate to the applicant? Is it pushed back to the agent, then the agent must communicate, or an email can come from?
Can you just check? I would suggest that you check with the I'm not actually sure, to be honest, because can you just check with the person doing the application as to what they normally do with their applications? So Gladys and Everjoy might do it slightly differently to Lindsay and Stacey, or whoever does it in Cape Town. Okay, so can you just double check with that, please?
All right, sure.
But either way, we as an agent should at least be holding the hand through it, or be included in any communication to those tenants. Okay.
Hey David, if I could just add a comment regarding Andrew's question. Andrews, what I've done in the past for rejected applications, sometimes there's an email from Gladys or Everjoy and I ask them to CC me on it to the applicant. But then other times I take the section that Gladys or Everjoy has provided about the checks that they've done. I copy and paste that into a message or into an email to the applicant, and then I inform them as to why their application has been rejected or denied, and we work with those facts, so it doesn't look personal. It doesn't look like there wasn't any checks done. There's reasons right there and there for them to see.
So
yeah, noted. Yeah.
Nick is living out the value, our second value, which is attentiveness, which is awesome. And it isn't that detailed. Sometimes we say to a tenant, you've been rejected because you've got a blacklisting. And sometimes tenants say, I didn't even know I had that. You know, sincerely, like they didn't even know. So yeah, that sometimes helps them, and they can deal with it, or they can sort it out, and then they can qualify, for example. But it and talking about that personalization or depersonalization, is that what I say to tenants is that I'm sure you're amazing. You're awesome. My interaction with you is like, you're awesome. Unfortunately, in our history in the past, there's too many awesome people that have turned out to be rotters. And so this is not personal. We just follow the same rules with everyone, because it's not you, it's all the people before you that have stuffed it up for you. Okay. And that's we're depersonalizing it. That's why I said. And that is genuine. I'm not just doing it, couching it to make it sound good. It's perfectly genuine. There's some really good people, that nice looking people that we get on with. Also on that point, guys, by the way, I say that we've got to screen people not only on the facts and figures, but also on that gut feel. Please listen to that gut feel. Now, sometimes we need to back it up with facts and figures, and it's shown in the application. But if you're not keen with someone, you don't get a good feeling about someone, and you know, all of us have got our antennas on. Please back yourself on that, because you are probably true. You are probably right. There's something not right. It just doesn't add up, and you don't know how to put your finger on it. It's more than likely true. Please back yourself, and don't push in the tenant that kind of looks good, but you don't have a good feeling about. And if that's your big enough, is that your criteria and your evidence is that I don't have a good feeling about this, well then back it, please. And if you have to escalate to me or chat to me about it, do it. But please don't put someone in that you don't have a good feeling about. There's a lot of weirdos out there, a lot of funny goings on, and it's not right. Okay, cool. So that's the application process. So once it's been approved, what happens is that the tenant is the leasing team is then putting the leasing admin team is then putting a lease agreement together. The lease agreement is then sent to the tenant to then sign, and they need to put in a deposit. The property is not secured until the deposit's in the bank account. So, oh no, I'm renting out for let's say property is for the 1st of May now. And yes, I can't believe it. 6 weeks or 8 weeks from 7 weeks from May. And let's say we're marketing early and it's for a month and a half time. Unless the money's in the bank, we need to continue to market. There's too many times where, oh no, I've changed my mind. And now you've only got 1 week left to market the property. So push for that deposit, because that tells the tenant that you secured the property. Okay. No, and talking about that, no keys are handed over until all money is reflecting in our account. The admin fee, the required deposit, and the first month's rent, or the pro rata, depending whatever it is. No matter how much pressure we get, unless the money is showing in our bank account and someone like Chandra or Everjoy has approved it, please, you just got to hold out. You just got to, yeah. Okay. So the lease agreement is done, the tenant signs it. Ultimately, it comes back to me and I sign it, or if it's in Cape Town, Colette signs it, and then that is recorded to the tenant. I think I have sent the lease agreement on to you guys. If I haven't, just let me know. I can send it out to you. Please have a look through that lease agreement. It's good that you get a feel for what's in that lease agreement. We use a TPN lease agreement with 1 or 2 small adjustments, but that's what we use. Let me see if there's anything else on that prior to the move-in. Okay, make sure the money's in the bank account, please. And the money's there and the money must be there to secure. Until that money's there, we continue to market. Okay. Bear in mind the landlord is interested in maximum cash flow, and because of our leasing process, we don't want to have an extra month empty because we messed up on our leasing process. Okay, so now we've got the lease sorted. Now we've got to do the tenant move in. So what we do is that we arrange for the tenant well in advance. When the property is, it's a bit tricky when there's a tenant, it's a little bit more complicated when there's a tenant moving out and we need to do a move out inspection preparation, and then we do a move in. But let's say the tenant is empty. Let's make sure that, let's do an appointment. Let's say it's on the 1st, I'm doing a move-in inspection with the tenant at 12 o'clock on the 1st of the month. What I typically do, so first of all, agree with that with the tenant. So because they want to do move-in appointments and everything. By the way, having moved myself numerous times, I'm sure many of you have moved, this moving thing is terribly stressful. Now, we like to think it's not, well, we like to hope it's not, but it is stressful. And what Karen and myself, my wife and myself have discussed is that, sure, it gets pretty hair-raising. And in some respects, we actually feel for our team in a way that, well, let me put it this way, it is stressful that sometimes these tenants manifest. And so we'll just take it as that it is a stressful period. So let's be as empathetic and as accommodating as possible in the way we couch it with the tenant and ignore any nonsense that they may push back on us on. So what I typically do is that I get to the property an hour, or it depends how long how big that property is. I get to the property well in advance. I do my inspection, typically on paper. Now, for now, most of the Joburg team is not on Red Rabbit. Nick is pioneering our Red Rabbit installation in Joburg, but we're using pieces of paper and we are doing our inspection. I'm not going to go through the full inspection now. We'll do that next time, but we're doing our inspection so that when the tenant arrives, I can then walk through the property with that tenant straight away, and then I hand over keys and move on. Okay, as opposed to the tenant arrives at 12, I arrive at 12, and the tenant's got to stick around for the next hour. Well, in the property that I rented from Chorus in Cape Town, I had to wait around for 2 hours because anyway, I didn't. So make your appointment with the tenant after you've done it, but be there before the tenant gets there. That's what I'm basically saying. The way you work it, you do the written inspection, you then walk around the property with the tenant. The Rental Housing Act refers to a joint move-in inspection. A joint move-in inspection means between you and the other party. You and the other party and the tenant. You're walking around and say, I'm going into this room. Okay, everything is fine. I've noticed that mark and that mark, and I've recorded it on this paper. Go to the next room. Oh, the door handle is a little bit loose. You're not responsible for that. Or the window latch is a bit loose. I've noticed that. When I do it with tenant inspection, I tell to the tenant, me noticing these things, it's not mean that it's all going to be sorted. It's basically noting it so that on the move out, you are not held responsible for these items. There may be one or two things that you're going to have to send through to the maintenance team to get done. And the tenant may insist that certain things will get done. But going through the inspection is not saying all these things are now going to be snagged and sorted. Okay, you're then going to go through the tenant go through the process with the tenant. The tenant is then going to sign that inspection form. Make sure you get the tenant to sign it. You then sign it, and that's what you submit to the to administration. In addition to that, typically I am recording every single key in the house. Don't do it like what happened with my key when I arrived at my house, which I'm renting out at the moment. There's no keys list. There's hundreds of keys, and because a key doesn't cost a lot of money. Getting the key made is what costs some money. A light bulb is not a problem, not expensive. Getting the electrician to go out and fit the light bulb is a problem. So these things do make a difference. I list every single key, M814, lounge, whatever, this key is front door, and then I get the tenant to sign for that. So when on the move out, they're handing over keys and I'm checking every single key together against that list. Okay, I'm submitting that to admin as well. And then I also am giving over giving over a defects list. The tenants got around about 7 days to then note any defects because on an inspection we may not notice absolutely everything, or now they're using something and it's not working, whatever. They then have 7 days in which to note all those additional snags. We then keep that on record from our perspective and add it into the move-in inspection. So on the move out, we can then compare it with the move out inspection. Let me see what else. The one thing I forgot to say on the lease agreement is the body corporate rules need to be attached to that lease agreement. So when you are getting on a property, a listing property, you are making sure that the landlord is providing you with the body corporate rules or the conduct rules. Those conduct rules then need to be with the lease agreement, and you need to provide the conduct rules to the leasing administrator so that the tenant can also sign those at the same time, or just initial those. What I've sometimes done is I got the tenant to initial it at the move-in inspection, but nevertheless, the body corporate is going to ask if there's any complaints. Have they seen that conduct rules? If they haven't seen those conduct rules, you can't really legally hold them to those rules. Okay. So when we're going into a property, it's not a question of just taking on the listing. It's the big thing is, what are the rules around this complex? What are the conduct rules and what are the utilities and charges? So those are two big things. Like, you know, there might be some odd rules and that's conduct rules. Typically not, but sometimes there are. Like sometimes there needs to be a move-in report. So you actually have to book a move-in. We actually have to deal with the managing agent to tell security to allow your move-in truck to go in. Or because people can move in and out of a property illegally, security is only going to allow your move-in truck or allow movers to come in if they've been notified by the body corporate, and they need, say, 24 hours to do that. So check those kind of things. There's a move-in form that needs to be filled out, submitted to the body corporate. There was an incident in Johannesburg the other day where we did not provide that in time because we were unaware of it, and it's a 500 Rand fine that's been implemented as a result. So just know what some of those rules are about move-ins and those kind of things. It's a lot of it's like the bigger complexes in Johannesburg. And so it's kind of, and as you get to know these complexes, especially those that are focusing on certain areas, you'll get to know these things and the idiosyncrasies around certain blocks. I'm not seeing a lot of it in Cape Town, although some of the newer, bigger blocks may have some of these rules. And that's it. You've moved in a tenant. So I've gone to the beginning to the end of the process. In the last few minutes we've got left, are there any questions or comments on this process so far, on the rental tenant placement process? Are we all cool? Tandeka, has that been useful? Did you learn anything today?
Oh, yes, David, I did. Hey, I learned a lot actually. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see you next week.
That'd be great. Awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you guys. It's going to be fantastic. I'm going to get to know Creel and Witbank and Sasselberg and Valpark. I don't even know what you need, guys. Need to show me Valpark. It's going to be awesome. I've heard so much about these places. It's going to be lekker. Okay, cool. So those that haven't got copies of the books, I'm going to give you the copy of the book. I just summarized the book pretty much in 45 minutes. So there's a bit more detail on it. But please get to know these things. A lot of it is, as you get to know this data, guys, should be second nature. And also, like some of these things I'm actually preaching to myself, like the details that are needed in this body corporate, like these complex needs and the rules and those kind of things. So I know there's quite a lot of content, I've said it, but as we go over and over again, and so you read my book and you do this and you do that, and you go through the experiences, you're going to maybe knock your head on and make a mistake. That's all very cool, because over a period of time, it's going to be second nature to you. And that's kind of what I want you to do, because you don't want to do leasing. It mustn't take you a whole lot of time. When I first rented my first property out, it took me like a week. What I've just said now, it took me like a week, like literally 4 days, like, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Now, obviously, we're doing hundreds a month. So, but getting to know it is super, super important. So it's part of, Marcelo, you haven't got a book. Oh, I must make sure I get you one. Okay. Okay, girls, guys, is there any other questions? Are we cool? Okay, I did promise that, so we need to stop recording.